All right, our old buddy Mark Schleybaugh has got the Dogs back at number one in the post-spring rankings. I'll throw them up on the screen here from. Well, you know what? I'm gonna scoot down just a little bit and put it on the screen here. Hey, I wonder. And Mark, I mean, I don't know if Mark can come on because of working ESPN, but it would always be. I would when I run into him, we talk occasionally, and I do wonder how long it takes him to throw these together. I mean, what's really changed in the spring for Georgia for the 24 season? I would say not a lot. But anyway, he says with a schedule that includes non-conference opener against Clemson and Atlanta road tests against Kentucky, Alabama, Tennessee, Texas, and Ole Miss, a fourth straight unbeaten regular season might be asking much for the Dogs. But there's a reason Coach Kirby Smart's program won back-to-back national championships in 46 of the last 48 games. Carson Beck is primed for a big season, and he'll be surrounded by plenty of playmakers and what should be one of the sport's best offensive lines. I agree with that. Replacements will have to be identified on the interior defensive line and in the secondary, but that hasn't been a problem in the past. Mikael Williams, who's going to play more outside linebacker this season, looks ready for a breakout pass rusher as a pass rusher. Georgia is stacked at linebacker and brings back safety Malachi Starks, one of the best players in college football. Hey, listen, Mark's dead on right about, there is certainly a weakness, if you want to call it that. Well, it is. I mean, it's just not as strong as the rest of the team. The interior defensive line, they're going to have to get it done. I mean, so goes the rest of the season. I mean, they can beat, Kentucky and Clemson and, probably Ole Miss with the defensive line, but those guys are going to have to play well against Alabama, against Texas, and against ESPN's number 2 or Mark's number 2, which is Ohio State. He's got Ohio State at 2. He's got Texas at 3, which I think he's right about that. I would wonder from Mark's perspective if Ohio State has gotten closer to Georgia, but I wouldn't say that that's the case in the spring. Like Ohio State, if you were to just take the traditional, from one season to the next, Ohio State would not be as close to Georgia in like if this were 2017. But with the portal and all of that has changed Ohio State. It's made them stronger for sure. I mean, Caleb Downs, Quinshon Judkins, those two specifically, they weren't like that. Those were good gets. And I mean, Judkins is the real deal for sure. How Chip Kelly will come into this thing, I don't know. Ohio State's got to deal with Oregon. They've got to deal with Michigan. I will mention Penn State, but they never do anything. So, and then Mark goes on to say Texas, Oregon at 4. He's got Notre Dame at 5. Listen, right? If I'm picking right now, I would have Ole Miss in front of Notre Dame, but I don't love either of them. I mean, there's always a lot of talk about Notre Dame right now. There's a lot of talk. Like, what is better at Notre Dame right now than a season ago? For sure, I mean, in my view, the quarterback for sure. Riley Leonard's a good player. He's a really good player. I mean, they kind of walked the dog against Clemson. That's a pretty good defense, and they did what they needed to do on that front. But like Ole Miss, they lost Quinshon Judkins. I mean, they got Walter Nolan. They lost a really good running back. I just don't, there are a lot of it. Look at all these SEC teams. You got Georgia as the 1, Texas as the 3, Ole Miss, Bama, Mizzou, boom, boom, boom. I mean, like, it's legit out there in this league. And Georgia plays all those teams except Missouri. They play everybody but Missouri, y'all. It's just, it's going to be a challenging season for Georgia. It is curious to see Penn State not in the top 10. It is curious to see NC State in front of Clemson. I did want to say this about Clemson. We're going to talk about Clemson a lot in the future. What people are going to talk about that's killing Clemson is the transfer portal. No, that's not killing them. That is one thing that's killing them. Dabo's insistence on not adapting to the new world of college football. That's what's killing Clemson. They're not recruiting at the level that they once did. No, they don't have Mike Williams. I mean, obviously, they don't have Trevor, Deshaun. They don't have Phil Maffa is a pretty good back. He's not as good as some of these other guys they had at running back. So they don't have the players that they once, they once had. But here's Mark talking about, as my colleague David Hale pointed out, there were 4 college football teams that didn't take a transfer in the portal this season: Army, Navy, Air Force, and Clemson. So I don't understand it. I don't. I don't understand it. There's a lot of great guys where Clemson is the right fit for them, and they're not at Clemson. You should go get those guys. But that's not, he's just showing that he feels like his way is the best way. Perhaps he feels like his way is the only way. I don't know. They got the Vols at 15. NC State at 13, we'll see. But look, let me not bury the lead. Georgia being the one coming out of the spring. I think Mark was at the spring game. I can't remember. I was on the field. He had to have been there. But, it's just, it feels like this is a Georgia-Ohio State situation. But unlike for Ohio State, the Dogs really do have to navigate a treacherous season. Now, Georgia doesn't have to play at Oregon, which I believe Ohio State does have to play at Oregon. Well, that would be not fun. But I could be wrong about that. I am not wrong about that. They're a 1.5 favorite. That's a tough one, man. That's going to be a tough game for Ohio State. They completely could lose that game. But it doesn't mean that they shouldn't still be the favorite or a favorite to win the national championship. Just real quick odds here again. Georgia is the favorite, I would say, relatively significantly. It's not like beating people over the head at plus 300. Ohio State is plus 450. The Horns are at 750. Then Oregon at 850. Bama and LSU come after that at 1,300 and 1,500. Ole Miss at 1,500. Where is Clemson? Clemson's at plus 4,000. So nearly 10 times. Well, more than that, even where Georgia's at. The likelihood is Georgia's got 10 times more likely to win it than Tennessee. About 12 times more likely to win it than Clemson. SC is at 4,500. Davo's got to get it going quicker. People aren't going to give him any leeway here soon. It's people are going to be getting kind of aggravated, and they're already kind of aggravated. Georgia Tech, an 11.5 point dog in Dublin. Clemson, Georgia 13.5 over Clemson. That's a little bit high from what I've seen, but I think it could get up to 16 by the end of the day. We'll see. A&M, it depends on where you see this Notre Dame A&M game. FanDuel right here has got Notre Dame as a 1.5 dog at College Station. ESPN's got it at even. SC is a touchdown dog to LSU. Texas, a 3.5 point favorite at Michigan. That game is really critically important, I have to say, the second weekend of the season. This seems low to me. Clemson as a 7.5 point favorite over NC State at home. I don't know why Duke and North Carolina are on here. Georgia is anywhere from a 3.5 to a 4.5 point favorite over Alabama. Depends on where you see it. Clemson only a 3.5 point dog at Florida State. Oregon and Ohio State, we talked about that earlier, 1.5 points for Ohio State, a slight favorite on the road. Georgia, a slight favorite over Texas. Georgia and Ohio State are not, them both winning those games seems, I don't know about that. So, and then LSU, a 2.5 point favorite over Alabama. I do wonder too, y'all, what happens if and when, Alabama wins 9 games. That's another thing. Bama, that is not out of the realm of possibility at all that Alabama would lose 3 games. They play Georgia, they play LSU, and then they're going to be dogs in both those games. They're not going to lose to Wisconsin, in my opinion. That would be full-blown, meltdown. We got a problem. Houston, we got a problem. That would be full meltdown for Bama folks. And that would be 2 weeks before they play Georgia. But that's not going to happen. I think, if they can get past Georgia, you see a scenario where they could maybe just eat a loss and that's it. But they got Georgia. They got to play at Tennessee, which to me they can lose that game. They got to play at LSU. They got to host Missouri. They can lose all 4 of those games. I very seriously doubt they lose at Oklahoma or against Auburn, but that's me, and we'll just see how that progresses. But I with Georgia being the one, it's not surprising. They're the betting favorite, yada yada yada. But Georgia's got to close the deal. The other thing that's curious here too, I've spilled on Oklahoma because apparently I have no self-control, and y'all are still watching, but I have no self-control. They do get to play on a Friday night. I think that's awesome. That's awesome for them. That shows you're not a real SEC pro team. But anyway, I would love that at Georgia personally, but that's me. They open with Temple. They got Houston, which I don't think is going to be a problem. They got Houston and Tulane, and then they host Tennessee, go to Auburn, and play Texas. Like, hello. Are they going 3-0 in that? They are not going 3-0 in that. So, and then they go to Carolina. They host Carolina, a game that, Oklahoma should win that game for sure, but we'll just see. They got the close is tough. I mean, they go to Ole Miss, they host Maine for some reason, and then they go to Missouri, they play Alabama, and they go to LSU. I mean, they probably will lose, 3 of their last 5 games, and that's not going to be a lot of fun there because there will be a lot of discussion about Brent Venables and his time. But we'll just see how this goes. With a team in Georgia that, they should be very highly ranked, and they are. And we will find out just how good this team is the first game. Everybody is going to poo-poo Clemson, and that's their prerogative. And I'm sure I will get my punches in too. And including Clemson people, I've heard it enough from them already how they have no chance. But that game is a legitimate – you can learn a lot in that first game whether you win or lose. And, Georgia needs to play a crisp game on offense against a good defense. That's a good defense from Clemson. If Georgia allows 20 points from the Clemson offense, you might there might be a reason to wonder what's going on. Because when you look in the recent past, I'm going to go on a rant here. I'm sorry, just hang in there. But if you look in these last few seasons, and I'll get it on the screen, this is a Clemson offense that's struggled consistently. And you kind of look around here, and there's not a lot of teams that are scoring 20 points. And so you got Bama, Tech did, the Gators did, but that was in garbage time. Vanderbilt did with a ball that they set up at the 1-yard line. Like, if they're scoring 20 like that, there's no red flags. The way Auburn did, again, I'm talking about they drive the field and do a legit 60-yard or longer drive 3 times in the game, then something has happened differently than we're used to. Okay, you look at the Kent State game, you look at the Mizzou game. Florida again scoring 20 against Georgia. That's amazing. Florida's had a lot of points against Georgia, but a lot of failure at the end of the day in terms of the scoreboard. These 2 games right here, the 30 and the 41 for LSU and Ohio State. Those were, fireball offenses that really scored a lot. Does Clemson have players like Ohio State and LSU? I would say they don't on offense. And, I would be concerned, as good as he is, I would be concerned if Sammy Brown is either my best or second or third best player on defense. That's not ideal. That's not an ideal situation. Was Malachi Starks Georgia's third best player? For third best player on the team. Was he the third best player in 2022? No, he wasn't. I don't think he was. He might have been. He was the best. He was probably the best defensive back in terms of going and getting the ball. But that's my point. So there's still a lot to learn. I'm talking nonstop here. Y'all are hanging with me, which is great. But there's a lot to learn still. We still have June, July, August. so we got, a solid 3 months until we learn a lot about this Georgia team, 90-ish days. But that Clemson game will matter, and, it will be a way to build a bridge towards the game in Alabama. It's possible. I doubt what I'm about to say. It's possible the game in Lexington could be more complicated for Georgia than the game in Tuscaloosa. You just don't ever know what you're getting into from one year to the next. I mean, which game was more difficult? Georgia playing number 1 Tennessee in Athens or playing at Missouri? At Missouri was more complicated and much more challenging of a game. So you never know. But that Mark's got them as number 1. I'm not surprised by that. I thought it was possible he could stick Ohio State in there, but no, I think it makes the most sense to have the Dogs there. But the first weekend is going to be a lot of fun.